a list from, 3 months ago, basically just Bile Blights, Devour Fleshes, and main deck Duress, but all the old staples. And he's playing against Jund Monsters.
Yep, so he's playing against Pete Repp. Pete Repp is piloting Jund Monsters. So we see here, this is one of those matchups, I know Jund Monsters, at least early in the format, was a red-green Monsters deck. Mono Black was really kind of the deck in the format that pushed Jund, like Monsters, out of the metagame. I know that now that it's adapted more of a Jund setup, it has some game here, but I still think a matchup I think is tough from the Monsters side.
Yeah, you do have some draws that are very hard for Mono Black Devotion to answer, and your Planeswalkers can be very good in the matchup, but it is very difficult for Jund Monsters to be just removal into Desecration Demon. That's a challenging opening. You will see a couple Dreadbores in the list, but by and large, Desecration Demon goes unchecked and is just too fast for Jund Monsters to race.
Demon is really good against Monsters, and Doomblade is really good against Monsters. So we see right now both players just developing their mana base. No plays on the first 2 turns other than Temples and a Swamp from Pikula. And the game really will start on 3. Pete Repp shocking to play what I would assume is a Domri this turn.
Yeah, can't cast Courser with these lands, so one would assume. And of course, 4 copies of Domri in his list here.
And that will be Domri Rod, the Planeswalker. It's going to try to get some card advantage before Pikula can start 1-for-1ing him.
I wonder if this is a moment where Chris is regretting not playing Abrupt Decay this weekend.
Certainly would have been good on the end step there, but because the Domri missed, Hero's Downfall will have to do.
Yeah. And this is the type of opening from these 2 players, even though things are going fine for Pete thus far, the game hasn't really even started, that he's at a big risk of just getting buried by a fast Desecration Demon if Chris has it.
Right, and I think what this does is it forces Jund Monsters to be an aggro deck more than it wants to be. You know in this matchup that late game, the Mono Black Devotion will use cards like Hero's Downfall, Underworld Connections to pull ahead. And we see a Duress from Pikula. This is actually a main deck Duress. It goes ahead and takes Abrupt Decay from Repp's hand. And now he knows what he has to work around. It's Stormbreath Dragon, Gorklan Rampager, and Scavenging Ooze.
Yeah, 1 main deck copy in this list. If you want to compare Chris's list to classic Mono Black Devotion list, it looks as though he has cut a land. He's playing 25. Usually you say 26.
Yeah. No answer right now, it looks like, for the Reaper of the Wilds. Devour Flesh. There is an answer. I was going to say, if you got to untap with the mana, that's one of the cards that can carry an aggro game against Mono Black.
And Reaper of the Wilds is a card that has declined in popularity. It used to be a staple, 2-3 copies in Jund Monster lists, usually down to 0 now. Pete's playing 1. This is another card that I feel, with the prevalence of Abrupt Decay, may be a better threat than it was a month or 2 ago.
Yeah, certainly any 4 mana card has really risen. Gorklan Rampager was the replacement creature for Repp. You see that Pikula's hand is really well positioned here. It's a stack of removal spells and an Underworld Connections. It's pretty ideal for this matchup.
And Chris willing to concede a card here off of Underworld Connections to Devour Flesh, a play that I like a lot. As long as he keeps his life total high, he can just ride this Underworld Connections and his removal spells and win from there.
All right, and it'll be Courser of Crufix from Repp. He's trying to get virtual card advantage. This is his way to fight Underworld Connections. Not as much card advantage as Connections, but it's a start. It shows Xenagos the Reveler rating on the top deck.
The problem is that a lot of his form of card advantage is predicated on interaction or specific text boxes mattering or hitting with Courser, whereas Mono Black Devotion just becomes a saw at stages like this.
Connections just is draw a card, nothing, And we see Nightveil Spectre from Pikula. And I feel like it was a little unfortunate that Repp wasn't able to hit that Stormbreath Dragon earlier. I feel like he could have gotten a lot of damage in off that. He did hit the land there off Courser, going to 27, so he'll have a chance to get that dragon into play this turn if he wants. We see, yes, so you're going to have to choose between, he has a Dreadbore, a Dragon, a Xenagos, and a Scavenging Ooze. He could Xenagos into one of his 2 mana spells. Otherwise, he could play both the 2 mana spells. Otherwise, he's just playing 1 card.
But playing the Xenagos here may be a little bit rough because if your Courser isn't available to block, or if it gets killed, then the Mutavault starts threatening Xenagos, so
he's just going to Dreadbore away the Nightveil Spectre. And then follow, looks like, with a Scavenging Ooze and a mana open.
I think this play is pretty reasonable. You still get to keep your biggest threats in hand. Whether or not that's ideal against a deck with Thoughtseize is a different question, but he gets to develop his board a little bit and prevent Chris from hitting with the Night Vale Spectre. It might have been different if there was something completely uncastable on the top of the deck, but the fact that it's a land, I think, means Pete just wants to get that Night Vale off the table.
Chris drawing another extra card. Now, walk me through this. To me, it seems right now that what Pete Repp has to focus on is Pikula's life total. Like, every time he deals damage, that's one fewer card off Underworld Connections. You know, he has to aggro out because, like, Pikula's going to get there if this goes on long enough.
Yes.
And that's where cards like Grey Merchant are so scary, is they just, you know, that the life gain there is not insignificant.
Pete does not have the option of playing a controlling game here in the face of this Underworld Connections. That plan's off the table. And I don't think it's a plan that Jund Monsters is well suited to fight in this matchup, even if Underworld Connections wasn't in play for Chris right now. So he has to just become a damage race deck.
All right, draw for the turn there was going to make a stomping ground there with Courser.
And again, this allows him to pump into the Ooze and play Stormbreath this turn.
Yeah, so he has a lot of damage on the table. This is exactly where he wants to be. It didn't swing with, no swing with Courser there. I mean, he probably wasn't. Pikula was likely not blocking anyway. And you see there, Pikula's going to take 8. That drops him down to 12.
Yeah, and the incremental points of damage do matter on Pete's side of the table. You're playing against a deck with Grey Merchant. It hits for chunks and 6 with Desecration Demon, has access to Mutavault, so the points of damage are not free. I think that's a misconception against Mono Black Devotion, where you think like your life total doesn't really matter. Your life total matters quite a bit against this deck.
Right. Repp is at 23. Thanks to Devour Fleshes, he's got some extra padding to work with. What Pikula's got to be worried about is that Repp's 1 mana away from monstersing that Stormbreath Dragon.
So
then it can swing through a possible Desecration Demon.
Yeah. Chris has a lot of powerful tools in his hand here. He has a Demon, Underworld Connections, and a Grey Merchant. The question is, does he want a Grey Merchant this turn? Or does he want to develop his board to lead to the largest possible Desecration Demon, the Grey Merchant rather, the following turn?
Connections and Demon this turn, perhaps.
Yes. Which is the play I believe that I like here.
Yeah, it's interesting. He's the second Connections. It's not like he's actually tapping it for mana. He's just putting black mana symbols on the table and then saving the enchantment for later. And he does not feel like he has time to make that play. He's just going to Grey Merchant for 6.
Yeah, the play I'm suggesting is pretty risky, but I think it is his highest upside play.
And Domri is the draw for Repp. And he has the land on top, so he has the option of monstersing the dragon if he chooses to. He also can just simply play out his hand. And this feels like it's in Repp's favor right now.
Yes, he's definitely has the edge here, although all it takes really is one hero's downfall from this spot or something to answer the Stormbreath Dragon, and Chris is right back in it. He's got a lot of powerful tools in his hand, too.
Yeah, he doesn't need much. He just needs more Doom Blades. Let's see here. So it's Xenagos the Reveler and Domri Rod, both in his hand. He has Planeswalkers as well as a land. I believe a Stomping Ground. He's going to shock for the extra Stomping Ground off the top of his deck. Only shocks for 1 thanks to Courser of Kruphix. And another monster on top. That one's Pelukrinos.
Not the most well-suited threat for this particular matchup, but at this stage, any 4-mana 5/5 is going to be good.
Really, any 5/5, just something with numbers.
Yeah. All he needs to do is stay out in front of Chris and try to end the game before the card advantage takes over.
Yeah, so he's going to go ahead and cast Domri. And he can use the Domri to cheat, as it were, and draw the Pelukrinos, or he can use it to fight away a Grey Merchant.
There is some allure for going for the card advantage play of just drawing and casting Pelukrinos, but Pete gives up on a lot of attacks this turn by doing that.
Right.
And with the Underworld Connections in play, you have to worry about giving Chris extra time, even when it seems really powerful on the surface, like getting a free Pelukrinos. May not be the best use of resources.
He's just using the Domri as a kill spell, and I like that a lot. He's going to go ahead and use the Domri to go ahead to fight away a Grey Merchant. That looks like he's going to cast as a Xenagos. And going to go ahead. I wonder if it's a Satyr, whether he'll just make mana off it and pump his Ooze. He has options. Probably still a Satyr.
Yeah, the Satyr here feels really good to me to make. I mean, it essentially frees up the Courser to attack, because Chris is either trading with a Mutavault or just putting Gray Merchant in front, and that frees up your Courser to hit for 2.
Yeah, so he's just trying to maximize damage. Yep, Satyr token made for Repp. And no swing by the Ooze, doesn't want to lose it to Mutavault. Just swinging Storm Breath Dragon. So a lot of setup, but not a lot of damage there, actually.
And this game is kind of getting pushed into a spot where a removal spell on the Storm Breath Dragon is an enormous draw for Chris. Now, Pete has other resources to work with, but...
Yeah, it looks like Chris drew a Thoughtseize for the turn. Not very helpful, as Pete did play out all his threats.
And the Xenagos is a great insurance policy against Desecration Demon.
Yeah, and Pikula, with no way to win it, goes ahead and scoops and moves on to game 2. So a pretty impressive game 1 there for Repp's deck. You know, it was the Doomblades and Underworld Connections draw. That's what Pikula wants to be doing in this matchup. I think at the end of the day, it seemed like there weren't enough removal spells in Pikula's decks. Despite the card advantage, he just wasn't able to kill everything.
Well, Pikula has a very much a week 1 Born of the Gods standard removal suite in his deck that eventually got invalidated because of Jund monsters and green-red monsters. His removal suite, 4 Hero Downfall, of course, the industry standard there. 2 Bioblight, 4 Devour Flesh as kind of the flex removal slots. That removal suite is really poorly suited to fighting Jund monsters because Bioblight kills very little, basically nothing. And Devour Flesh sometimes it's good, but against a deck that has a lot of spare mana creatures as the game develops, is not going to be a powerful top deck. So
yeah,
Chris's deck, the absence of Abrupt Decay, the Devour Flesh Bioblight suite, not really well suited to fight Jund monsters, and he's quickly down a game.
Yeah, he even got full value off the Devour Fleshes there, and which is, as you said, not a sure bet in this matchup.
Yeah, he killed things with text boxes. That's no guarantee that that's going to be happening, but still, just not enough to stop 4 4s and 5 5s game 1 and Pete's up a game.
Yeah. Well, post-board, things will get better for Pikula. Pete Repp does not have much of a sideboard for this matchup. His cards are really being used to shore up other matchups. As I'm not really sure he brings in anything in the matchup for the Mono Black Devotion deck.
Well, let's take a look here. I think, yeah, I mean, there's very little here. A Mizium Borders, a Doomblade, 2 Golgari Charm, 2 copies of Putrefy, a Bow of Nylea, 2 Nylea's Disciples, a Vraska, 3 Mistcar Hydra, 2 Rakdos Return. I think Rakdos Return and Vraska are fine. Putrefy is fine, but you're right. We're not talking about a lot of significant upgrades here.
It might be. I mean, he might board them in some cards, and simply because his main deck Mizium Mortars is very weak. You know, maybe he doesn't want as many mana creatures against a really heavy removal spell deck. But there's nothing that's really going to swing the matchup too hard. He's just making, like, rather than boarding in cards that are actively good, he's just boarding out a couple cards that are actively bad.
It's possible he wants to keep in his Mortars when he's on the draw as additional assurance against Pack Rat. He doesn't have a lot of answers to that while he's on the draw. On the play, Domri suddenly becomes a much more reliable way to fight it. But I agree. In general, he's making pretty much lateral changes to the deck. He's removing some 4 out of the 10s and maybe adding some 6 out of 10s.
Yeah, and it's even on the play, things like mana creature into Pelucranos can be an answer for Pack Rat. You know, the deck's efficiency on its creatures is high enough that it can race a Pack Rat if things are going really well.
Yes. On Pikula's side of the table, 2 copies of Doomblade, 2 Dark Betrayal, 2 Freakish Cure, 2 copies of Erebos, God of the Dead, 3 Lightbane Zombie, 3 Duress, and a Staff of the Death Magus. Again, not a lot for this matchup. You often see a full set of Doomblades, or at least some distribution of 4+ Doomblades in ultimate prices. Only the 2 copies of Doomblade. Of course, those are going to come in alongside the 3 copies of Lightbane Zombie. I wouldn't be stunned to see the Duresses come in as well, as Chris's build is pretty susceptible to Planeswalkers. Again, no copies of Abrupt Decay in his list. And if the Jund Monsters list is sideboarding in anything in the matchup, it's additional spells at the expense of creatures. So right. Duress might get better here, but not a lot going on in Chris's sideboard to improve this matchup. The 2 Doomblades, of course, are superstars, and the 3 copies of Lightbane Zombie are quite good as well. But this is on the lighter side of sideboarding for this matchup historically for Mono Black Devotion.
Yeah, I would say historically they have I mean, this is the minimum, right? Normally they have at least 2 Doomblades, and if the Lifebane Zombies weren't in the main, there's at least 3 in the board. So sometimes you'll see more of each of these cards, but this is the minimum that he'd board in.
Yeah, Chris is showing a lot of respect for Burn this weekend. That's where a lot of his sideboard slots are being devoted, with the 2 copies of Parika's Cure and the 1 copy of Staff of the Death Magus. He's trying to shore up his aggressive matchups there a little bit.
Now, just 1 staff. Normally I see that card as a 3 or 4 of when people decide to play it.
I think 1 is fine. I mean, it's high upside.
You only need 1 for the matchup. It's not.
And I think it's pretty overrated in beatdown matchups. It's
just for red, white, burn,
just
right?
for red, white, burn. I've had people bring it against me when I'm playing just generic beatdown decks, and it's been usually horrendous.
That sounds bad. It sounds like, I mean, you're not going to gain much more than 7 off of it. And 3 mana gain 7 is not a particularly good spell unless your opponent's playing, 2 mana deal 3.
Right.
In which case, it's a great spell. All right, so Pikula on the play, no Thoughtseize or Duress turn 1, just a Swamp. He does have a turn 2 Pack Rat, so he may decide to go on the Pack Rat plan this game.
Jund Monsters, again, not a lot of answers to it on the draw. Now, that said, Jund Monsters can just outclass it by Caryatid into bigger stuff. So It's not necessarily game over, but if he doesn't have anything to do on the second turn and can't kill this Pack Rat, it could be big trouble.
All right, well, he's going to go Scavenging Ooze, and that's not, if it was a mana ramp card, I'd be happier about it.
These are the types of draws where Pack Rat has the potential to be excellent.
Yeah. So, and looks like he's setting up to Pack Rat. 3rd land passes back. Those lands, it's right out of the land station box.
Yeah, I was going to comment on it. I elected not to because I really like Chris a lot, but for a person who's been playing Magic as long as Chris is, with the amount of success, these lands show some disrespect for the game I just don't think is appropriate.
If you open an M11 land station box, those are the first 3 lands you'd find in order.
Right. So there is a Courser of Crufix, I believe.
That's the 4th art. Yeah, right there.
Revealing Vraska.
Yeah, discarding. The Vraska's on top of the deck. Pikula end step's going to make a Pack Rat.
Yeah.
And here we go.
And now the race is to see if Chris can get these Pack Rats out of Mizium Mortar's range, because then that's the lock, as
Once
it's known.
the 5th rat is down, things are very good for Pikula. A Mutavault helps that immensely. So right now it's, this turn would be Rat 3, and he'd still be 2 turns away from Mortar's Proofs Rats. But a Mutavault speeds that up an entire turn.
So now, Chris, in his hand, has a Swamp, a Temple, and a Desecration Demon. So he has the option of either saying, play my Swamp and play Desecration Demon, or play the Temple and just commit to making another Rat this turn. It looks like Chris is choosing Plan B, which I like a lot here. Because if you play Desecration Demon in this spot, you're giving a lot of value to a card like Dreadbore, where your Demon dies, the Ooze grows, you can't block this turn. Given the weakness that Pete has shown thus far in this game, I think it's much better just to try to overwhelm him with Rat tokens.
All right, he plays the 3rd land, Temple, and just leaves open the Pack Rat. You see Caryatid on top for Repp. And I don't believe Repp has the Mortars in hand right now, so he's going to have to race. And I don't know if he's up to the challenge at the moment.
It's very tough.
Like, we were saying before that Jund can race Pack Rat. The things that help it race Pack Rat is being on the play, having a Mana Ramper into a Pelucranos, or a Mana Ramper into a Reaper of the Wilds. Repp has had none of those.
Another issue here is every turn that Pete spending all of his mana, committing another threat to the board, Chris has the option of simply killing it with a Doomblade or a Hero's Downfall. Pete doesn't just have to erase these theoretical rats. He also needs to be able to beat removal periodically hitting his key pieces. It's very hard to do all of that at once.
We'll see. He does shock for a 4-drop, so we'll see what he gets to commit to the board here. And it looks like it's going to be the World Eater. That's Pelucranos. Let's see whether it's a downfall. Nope, it's going to be a Pack Rat. And, I mean, I think Pikula's far enough ahead that he can just ignore He can ignore the Pelukrinos too. I think he's going to outclass that as well.
Absolutely. I mean, these rats are becoming 4/4s next turn. No way Pete can do anything meaningful against that. The following turn, they're as large as Pelukrinos.
Yeah, and because Pete hasn't played a ramp spell, Chris is not in fear of overloaded mortars. He knows that if he chooses to, he can have 5/5 rats.
And again, that is not quite a lock, but very hard for Jund Monsters to beat. I mean, Chris is going to be in a position soon where he can just start attacking. And it does not take long for these pack rats the total sum of them to be a lethal attack. Right. I mean, Pete has to start jump blocking potentially as early as 2 turns from now.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. So the pack rats, they play like this transition game where they just defend, and then lethal.
Yeah, it's suddenly now you're jump blocking.
So you can do that. We're on Pikula's main phase. This is turn 5. His draw for turn was Underworld Connections. We see a Connections, Desecration Demon in hand. Really just looks like more pack rats.
They look like rat tokens to me.
Yeah. Just a grip full of pack rat tokens.
He has a Gray Merchant in hand. I think he's going to want to try to keep that one.
Yeah, so like, this is what you think of, what are the cards that Pikula keeps? If any, he could keep a Gray Merchant, sure.
Doomblade, because he has 5 mana, so a 2-mana removal spell that can target is very good here.
Mm-hmm.
Hero's Downfall is probably flexible enough that he would keep it, even though it's not the most efficient thing for the purposes of...
He would keep it if he had something else to discard, but he would still discard it.
Yes.
He wouldn't just keep it.
I think it's basically Gray Merchant, Doomblade, and another copy of Pack Rat, maybe Mutavault. Well, but it's a really narrow class of cards at this stage.
But Mutavault, you'd just be dropping.
Correct.
So yeah, it's not much. Which is interesting. It gives Pete perfect information to play with, really. Like, you just kind of like, what the line. You basically know your opponent's line. The question is if you can do anything about it. Well, right now he can fight away a Pack Rat.
Fighting away, the original Pack Rat also allows him to grow with Scavenging Ooze. So if there's no removal spell in Chris's hand, this is not a bad turn for Pete.
And it looks like there's not. I think it's a Connections. Yeah, it's a Connections, Gray Merchant, and Demon. So yeah, that's going to work. Pikula a little concerned here. This does mean that mortars could happen.
And Pete with triple red in play and a land on top. So, all the pieces of the puzzle are there. But he's gone so far down this road that I don't think Chris can get away from making pack rats.
No, he's got to just...
He's priced into this game plan at this point.
And his hand didn't really... I mean, the other game plan he could have had was to play a Connections and try to draw into some kill spells, which is a reasonable line, but not at this point anymore.
And also, you have to keep in mind through all this that, Pete's probably drawing cards like Abrupt Decay, potentially Golgari Charm, cards like Dreadbore, things that don't have a ton of utility against the Pack Rat plan, but are really good if you suddenly pivot and start doing other things. So not only is Chris committed in part because of the resources that he's committed to the Pack Rats, but also because there's a very strong chance that whatever he about faces into is going to be worse because Pete's been sitting on otherwise dead cards.
All right, we'll see here. So on 5, it's just more creatures. It's going to be, a court goes and makes Caryatid there. And we'll see now where Pikula's at. If he has land 6, he can double rat. I don't believe he does. Yeah, we see Gray Merchant. Looks like another Demon. And he's going to start, looks like he's going to start the rat aggro.
So, pretty bold play here.
Yeah. Well, that means you're just offering one of them up to the Pelukrinos. So walk me through this line. I would have thought he would just be on the defense for longer.
Well, he may respect Domri enough to want to get it off the table. The problem that I have with this line is that Pete is representing 7 mana next turn. He has 6 in play, so any land is then 7 mana. And that means, say Pelukrinos blocks this turn, the best thing that Chris can do is make another rat, they are then 3/3s, which means a 7th land allows Pete to fight one of the rats, make an 8/8, and now there's a huge shift in the game, and the Scavenging Ooze is still available, of course, a crew fix, etc., etc. So
yeah,
unless Chris is getting off the pack rat plan entirely, which may be the case, maybe he just wants to play Desecration Demon and move into his second phase. This attack may just doom the pack rat plan.
And I think it does. You're right, because Polukranos, has the potential to eat. Once Polukranos eats a rat, the pack rat plan's done.
Yeah, and it's possible Chris is just waving a white flag on that plan. He may feel like he's getting overwhelmed with resources. His pack rat's not going to be able to keep pace, and he just needs to go do something else. And that's what he's doing here. So in that world, that makes some sense.
Yeah,
it's still rough for him to invest all the resources that he's invested in these rats and then about face like this.
Yeah, so he made Underworld Connections. He drew a card for the turn. It was a removal spell, I believe a Devour Flesh. But he's going to take damage. He's going to start taking it very quickly here. As you see, right now, no blockers on Pikula's side, and Repp has 9 power on the board. If not more, including Mute Vault and activations.
And it's really tough to about face against Jund monsters in my mind once you've gone down the pack rat plan, because they have so many cards post board that blow up your other angles of attack that are rotting in their hand often when you are pack ratting. So it's not like you can just say, all right, well, I'm going to move to Underworld Connections because that can get hit by Abrupt Decay. You can't move to Desecration Demon because that can get hit by Dreadbore. It's tough to win with pack rat, but once you've gone down that road, I feel like you often need to just go all the way with it because the alternatives are much worse.
Once you start making pack rats, you got to stop casting everything that's not pack rat.
Not in every matchup, but I believe against Jund monsters that is the case.
Yeah, and Pete's going to use Vraska to take care of a rat. He chose Vraska over Polukranos Monstered on 5. That's just to get more permanents on the table, I assume.
Yeah, for sure. And it's not like the pack rat can threaten Vraska at all next turn. He also gets to just do this, which is hit for a ton.
Yeah. He's going to swing now for 1, 2, 3, 4 for 9, 11, putting Pikula down to 8.
Yeah, this is a great line from P2. It's, all right, do you want to spend your turn making a rat to take care of Vraska? That's fine. I still have 1,000 points of attack in play.
Yeah, and I feel like Pikula jumping ship on the pack rats doesn't really work.
Well,
it's like once you're in, you're in.
Yeah, it's... Now,
I'm not sure the pack rats would work. I'll be frank about that.
Yeah, Chris may have very well lost this game doing it the other way too. I'm not saying that that's a path to victory necessarily, but once you've gone halfway down the road, it's really hard to turn around. And in the world where you commit to pack rats, let's say Pikula draws Doomblade with 5 lands in play, all of a sudden the game shifted because you get to Doomblade something threatening, make a rat, and now the tempo swung. In this world, how good is even a Doomblade to draw? Not really that helpful from this standpoint. So even though he was losing, maybe he had more live draws, and with Grave Merchant in hand, of course, the pack rats are incrementally adding to your devotion count as well.
And I'm not even... Chris Pikula is going to be hard-pressed to stay alive for even 2 more turns. He's going to look at his options, draw a card that puts him down to 7. It's a land. He can make a rat. He has a Devour Flesh. He's going to swing the Vraska just down to 1. Is he going to... see? I don't even know if he's going to discard to it. Nope, just swings it down to 1. He's going to go ahead and Grey Merchant. Remember, pack rat does have a mana cost, so that's going to gain him 5 and move him back up to 12. But he's already taking at least 9. In fact, he has to chump block with this Grey Merchant because if he doesn't, Repp will just pump the Polukranos.
Keep in mind, Repp also has a Mute Vault in play too, which is another source of damage. I mean, he's got a lot of tools to work with here.
So if he has a kill spell, that'll win it for him. Which he does not. He looks like he has a replacement Ooze and a replacement Courser. But that should be enough. Vraska at 1 will just be ticking up.
Yeah, just trying to noodle through here. Can't just kill the Gray Merchant outright. He's short on mana to be able to fight it.
Yeah, he's short on mana there. For sure, if he swings Courser, Ooze, and Pelucranos, he's forcing a chump block from Gray Merchant on presumably Pelucranos.
One of the big ones. Courser comes through for sure, and Gray Merchant's just chumping.
And I think that's what we'll see. Yep, all three swing in here. So yeah, Gray Merchant is going to have to block one of the big guys. It cannot take the free block on Courser. If it does, Pete could monster the Pelucranos for X equals 3, therefore dealing exactly 12 damage. So the chump on Pelucranos happens. It's at least 6 free damage.
And once you get out in front of Mono Black Devotion, it's almost impossible for them to catch up. There's no Mutilate, no Damnation. They're playing a 1-for-1 game, so the bottleneck just becomes cards in hand and mana, and Chris is bottlenecked on both fronts.
All right. So Pete's going to go ahead and monsters the Pelucranos to eat the rat, and Pikula's board is empty. He's down to 6. Pete has 4 attackers, 5 counting Mutavault, and this should be the last turn.
Yeah.
He's taken away all of Pikula's creatures. He'll draw down to 5. And he finds a swamp, and that'll be it. 2 games to 0. Pete Repp, in rather convincing fashion, takes out Mono Black Devotion, piloted by Chris Pikula.
Yeah, Chris is, again, his removal suite not really that well set up game 1 to handle a deck like Jund Monsters. He's committed to fighting other decks, and his sideboard is not capped out on ways to fight this deck as well. He's showing respect to a lot of different decks in the metagame, the main deck Duress, and a lot of sideboard slots committed to trying to beat decks like Burn especially, but